Welcome to another session of All Things ADAS. I'm your host, Jerry Miller, and with me today I've got Steve Dawson from Hunter Engineering, and I've also got Spike from OEM Calibration. I almost forgot where you're from, Spike, there. So why don't you two go ahead and introduce yourself. Steve, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been with Hunter?
So I'm been with Hunter for about 8 years now, and I manage the DC region for Hunter, and I also deal with a lot of the collision centers around the country through a bunch of the different groups that are out there. I travel around the country talking with collision centers, with collision center groups about ADAS, about collision alignments, and how Hunter can be an integral part of their business.
And so, but you're out of the DC area, but that's not where you live though, right?
I do live in the DC area, yep.
Okay, all right, very good, very good. And Spike, a little bit about you.
Let's see, 38 years in collision, ADAS since roughly 2012-ish. And, and then we kind of rolled into OEM calibration and met Steve at SEMA this year and struck up some great conversations. So, I mean, it seemed like natural to bring Hunter into this, and they got a pretty cool system out there that we have beta tested. We beta tested most of these systems and really impressed with the system they have and the accuracy that it has. So I kind of wanted him to come on and give his side of everything and, tell everybody what a decent product it is.
You know, interesting. I started life off as a technician at a Ford dealership, and Hunter was around then. I mean, I'm retired now, but Hunter goes way, way, way back. And I don't know when Hunter actually started, but the nice thing about, I'm sure for you, Steve, is you don't have to try to defend Hunter as a quality company as far as, what they stand for and the equipment that they have. That kind of speaks for itself. So that part's pretty simple. And I'm curious, do you know when Hunter actually started?
So it started in 1945, 46, right after World War II. Lee Hunter had actually started doing battery chargers prior to the war. Went off to fight in the war and came back and started Hunter Engineering as it is today. In a different location, it's moved once since then, but yeah, I mean, great product, great brand recognition. I started at 16 as a technician with a D111 alignment machine. And I think most people, when you go out there, you start talking to people that were technicians, they know about when they started, when it came to if it was a light align or if it was a 111, a D111 machine, but we've been around for a long time through a lot of different products, and that's one of the nice things with Hunter is we have engineers in-house that are constantly working on what's next, the next iteration, what can help the manufacturers meet their requirements and their needs. So we're always working years in advance on the next product and the next great addition to the industry.
It's funny. Me and Jerry were talking. God, this has been years, probably 4 years. And a competitor to you guys brought something out to the market. And in my opinion, they rushed it. But I was telling Jerry, I said, these guys have the leg up. And he said, just wait. Before it's done, it's going to be Hunter. He said they always come out on top. And so I have to eat some crow with Jerry. And Jerry was right once again. But again, that's why I like Hunter. I think it's our same philosophy too, right? We don't need to be the first out. We need to be right when we go out. And that's what's really impressed me with Hunter. I didn't know the Hunter name like Jerry did, being a mechanical technician like he was. But I truly believe him now that you guys are going to do it the right way and come out with a great product instead of the first product. So kudos.
Yeah, that's usually the case. We are usually not going to be right there the first one because we want to make sure that, if it's inspection product, we want to make sure that when it's through the inspection lane, it's coming up with the same results it's on an alignment machine. When it comes to ADAS, we want to make sure that it is, no matter how many times we pull that car on and off, that it is spot on, repeatable every time.
Well, and I can vouch for that with the Ultimate ADAS. I mean, that is a slick system that we gave it everything we had, and it was accurate. So impressive.
Well, since you brought that up, I'll have to ask about it. But before we get there, it's amazing to me that how far Hunter and this whole industry has come from using strings and a bar with a couple pins that slide on it, doing alignment. A lot of people think that Hunter, basically is, for alignment machines, and the alignment rack. so to speak, whether it's the parallel and of course they're more than just that. But you brought up the ultimate. Let's see, I'm trying to think. The ultimate ADAS machine is what you call it, which I almost pronounced that wrong actually, but I'm just curious. It looks like I looked it up online. I haven't seen one personally, but it looks like a kind of a glorified alignment machine itself that rolls around. Now, and I'm curious, when you roll one of those in to any particular shop, I'm assuming you've got to have a level ground, or tell us a little bit about how that works.
So that is a full alignment machine. So very similar to like the older style aligners that we've been using for the last several years, our Hawkeye Elites. It is that system, that software is running in it, the cameras are running in it to do your traditional alignments. One of the unique things with Ultimate ADAS is as we compensate a car where we throw the targets on the wheels and we roll the car forward, we're compensating for a couple different things. One, to make sure where those targets are on the wheel, are they perfectly flat, are they centered, and things that we're measuring as we roll it. With the Ultimate ADAS, we're also measuring the floor. So we're making sure that we identify if there is a low spot or a high spot in that floor, and the system runs on what we call live plane. So it's using that compensation process to determine what is the condition of this floor. Is it on a rack? Where is the vehicle in space? And then the machine itself is going to adjust for that to make sure that every time it places a target, it's placing it exactly where it would need to be for that car, square, centered, and at the right angle based on where those wheels are. But we're not relying on the technician to have to make manual adjustments. We're utilizing the technology to be able to read that information and accurately determine where the target needs to be.
So let me see if I got this straight then. So it's an alignment machine, but it's more than that. It's also incorporates the ADAS system with it. Now, if I understand what you just said, you don't have to have the vehicle itself on a alignment machine or alignment rack. Is that correct? It can be on just the floor and then roll the machine to it?
Yeah, so if we're doing just ADAS calibrations, absolutely that can be the case. If we're doing alignment adjustments, it's nearly impossible to be able to do alignment adjustments without having it up in the air to be able to get your wrenches and things under there.
Right.
But when we're doing ADAS calibrations, there are going to be some times where we're going to need to have the car and the floor on the same plane. So for instance, like surround view targets, where you're going to have a mat laying around the car, that has to be on the same level plane. So that then would have to be on a flat floor. So if you've got an alignment rack, what we've been kind of helping shops with, which has a whole bunch of benefits, is to use what we call a pit rack, where the customer would build like a 12-inch deep pit, and the rack would get mounted in the base of that, so it's basically consistent from the floor to the rack, so that that car is now on the same level. We can do a lot more with it. If we were on a rack and the rack was 10 inches up in the air, let's say with the stack height, we might be able to do the front radar, the front camera, even the rear radars, all of the adjustments where we have some height adjustment to kind of compensate for that distance up in the air. But a surround view, we don't have that height compensation. So we're going to ask for the car to be on a flat floor, on the floor, to be able to do that. And again, we're going to map that floor as we move the car from the rack to the floor. We're just going to roll comp it again real quick. It's going to then measure up the floor and provide us that precise placement of the targets and document everything that it's doing.
So obviously not every floor in the world is completely flat. So how much can it compensate for?
So it's got about 3.5, 4 degrees of travel in there, but there are some radars and things that require some, 2 degree, 1.5 degree adjustments. If you got one of those, the threshold's a little bit lower. If you're doing a standard camera or radar that doesn't require that pitch change, we've got that room within the machine to be able to compensate for.
Okay. And how much room do you need around the vehicle or the machine? Obviously, it depends on what calibration you're doing on what kind of a vehicle. But if you were going to set this up, what would you tell a shop that they're going to need to have room for around? What's the expectation?
So it really depends on the makes that they're doing. Like you said, some makes require a massive amount of space, others don't. And in the average collision center, they, as much as many of them say, I'm doing all of the collisions out there, I'm doing every kind of make and model, they typically are 70-80% one make and model, and that's going to depend as to how much space it is. If they're doing Fords and they've got a lot of F1, you're going to need a bigger amount of space because the mats are huge and they're long. But if they're doing Toyotas or Hondas, not as much space maybe on either side, maybe a little bit more space in the front to handle their radar calibrations. It's one of those things where in the industry we've kind of gotten everybody almost panicked about, I've got to have a football field to be able to do calibrations. And the reality is, depending on the models you're doing, you might not need that much space. The machine itself doesn't really take up any more space than the OEM is going to require, other than maybe the 2.5 feet of the machine's depth might about be the only difference. But we never have to reposition the machine off to one side or in a different area that requires that footprint to be bigger. We're basically going to set that machine right in front of the car, and the lasers are going to point us to where to put the targets. And the only size difference is going to be how big of a target are we using. And like I say, the F-150 is the big one.
Right.
So, Steve, if I'm hearing right, if the manufacturer says you need 10 feet of dead space behind the target, you still have to follow that.
Right, absolutely. And that's one of the cool things with this system is we've loaded that in there. So if the OEM says we need to have X amount of dead space, the technician doesn't have to think about it. One of the early steps in the process, it throws out some green lines and red dots to show them, hey, this is what the OEM says for space. So it's not, well, you can finagle it or anything. It's showing them exactly what they need, what the OEM is telling us that they want to have for that space.
Very cool.
When you speak of the OEM, I'm curious, how quickly, when you get a new model vehicle that comes out, how quickly does Hunter get the information to be able to either have that in the software for whether it's, the ADAS calibrations or for the alignment specs? How does that get to you from the manufacturers?
So we basically purchase that information from the manufacturers, and we do, for alignment specifications, they get updated twice a year. So around November timeframe, we get the 2026 models that are already spec'd out. So usually that's the chassis that continued on from the 2025 models, maybe a 2026 model that they've been working on for a while, and they have all of those specs. But that's usually somewhat of an incomplete amount of information from the OEM just because they haven't distributed it yet. They haven't even published it. So then we'll do an update in May, which will then capture all of that, those ones that didn't, the 2026 models that didn't get in that first update. And when it comes to ADAS, we're doing them more on a quarterly basis where they're getting updated, because that changes not only, adding in new models, but sometimes they might change their procedure and have to shift and adjust that procedure a bit. So we want to have that procedure correct in Ultimate ADAS, because there's times where, like, you're putting in a target, like for instance a Toyota, one of those targets, it needs to be right up in front of the car. So we need to know that early in the process that the machine's going to end up right at the front of the car. So we're going to give the step for the technician to actually hang the target earlier in the process before they set that machine. So they're not trying to reach over the hood of the car trying to hang a target. They're actually doing it in a logical step to make it go as smooth and efficient. And then we also need more information. We need to know actually references for where that camera is on the windshield in relation to the front axle and the rear axle of the car, where the radar unit is in relation to the axles. So we have to input all of that into the system to make sure that we're getting accurate measurements to exactly where they want that target placement.
And your software then walks the technician through the procedure. Is that correct as well?
Yep. So all of that target placement is literally pictures, and they can read it if they want. We know that most technicians would rather read, but we also give them some pictures to follow if they want to follow the pictures.
Yeah.
But it really walks them through step by step, tells them when to hang a target. In most cases, or in all cases, will not let them hang the incorrect target. The system will not move to the next step. In many cases, there is no way to actually move it to the next step in any way, but it has to record that correct target to move to the next step to be able to place it.
And what you just said right there is really important in my mind, Steve. So, again, we do it a little different. We do it plumb bobs and do it that way. But To me, this is a really cool verification system. Whether, you're doing warranty type stuff where you need to use the OEM software to do that, but your system doesn't let it be tricked. Whereas I believe some of the other systems out there, you can kind of trick it and you can go on to the next step without making sure that you were completely compliant with the last step. So again, I think that's really cool, because I do feel there needs to be some kind of way to verify, no matter who the person is performing, right? We need some kind of standardization saying, yes, this was done right. And I really like that about yours, that it doesn't let you go on unless you've done it right to the previous steps.
Yep. Yeah, and very often, like you said, Spike, there's people will say, well, you know what, I used to just fudge the target up or move it over a little bit because it failed the first time. And, there are some manual adjustments, but it's not going to record it correctly. It's not going to show that it was done in the right specs. If somebody were to try to manually override things, it's going to stop them and say, nope, go back a step and get this right, so that we're ensuring that there is, the accuracy of that target placement is spot on.
So
Yep, I love it.
if I currently have a Hawkeye alignment machine in my shop, can that be upgraded since it's a software, or is there hardware that goes along with it that's different?
Unfortunately, our older Hawkeye systems, it is not. It is a very different arrangement with the weight of the entire crossbar, the gimbals that we add to it.
Okay.
It's not something, and all the mechanics of it is very, very different of a structure when it comes to the older style systems. The software will work the same, but the hardware is very different on the ADAS side of it. We do offer an aligner, so if we have a customer that says, hey, you know what, I want to do alignments today, but I'm not so sure that, I know in the future I'm going to be needing to do these ADAS calibrations, and I want to have something that I can upgrade. We do have a version now that somebody could get today and start doing alignments that, 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, decide, all right, I've got to do ADAS calibrations as well. That one we can convert.
Okay.
But anything prior to that one was unfortunately, not something that can add to it.
So, in my background, I got to deal with an awful lot of different manufacturers, and I can't even think of literally almost every single manufacturer that I dealt with. The factory, part of one of the pieces of equipment that they recommended, Hunter was always one of those pieces of machinery that they recommended. And right now I'm talking alignment machines. And so do you see that your ultimate ADAS machine, is that something that's going to be OEM required, do you think? Or is it still going to be the way it is right now, where there's two different types of systems?
Well, I think so as it is right now, there are some, like for instance, Nissan, it is their old way of doing it with strings and plumb bobs or an ultimate ADAS.
Okay.
There's a number of them that it's either us and maybe one other brand that are available for, let's say, a dealer to have and to be able to use. I see that going a little bit further down the line as it ends up becoming, it is going to be just like it is with alignment. Either it's going to be required for our unit and our unit alone, or ours and one or two others that are going to be the required ones for the OEMs. But it definitely, I can imagine on the OEM side, it's a little bit of a challenge where they've got to say, one, they've got to look at, we want to only have equipment that is accurate, repeatable, that has the documentation that we're looking for. So they want to approve that, but then they've got to, when it comes to making it mandatory and things, that makes it a little bit more difficult, where they've got to decide how are they going to take that out to their dealer base. How are they going to take that out to their certified collision centers? Are they going to say, no question about it, you have to have this machine, or are they going to give them some options? And I think that's always that soft walk that all the manufacturers have to go through, is to what makes the most sense for them at different times. But eventually, several manufacturers have gone to the fact that, well, Hunter is the system that we're kind of putting all of our eggs in that basket and getting it exactly what we want, especially when they start looking at, we want to have things like unique specs to our vehicles when they're in the dealership. We want to be able to, have something, if it's in a certified program, that we know that everything was done this way and we've got report back from the equipment. It's one of those things that could eventually force the hand, let's say, of an OEM to say, hey, it's only going to be this one, or it's only going to be this one or two. And we continue to try and build a product that is, that is not necessarily one that you're going to compare apples to anything else on the market. We want to stand a step above, so that when those manufacturers are looking for that piece of equipment that's a step above, we're already there.
Do you work directly yourself with OEMs at all, or is that somebody else?
I don't directly. I work with Bentley a little bit as the way we kind of work our accounts within Hunter. When it comes to the ADAS side, we brought in a new individual, David Agnew, who does a lot of that direct relationship with the OEMs. He has been, with tier one suppliers as well as with OEMs in the past. And it is, we continually have conversations back through the tool and equipment programs. I talk with a lot of the manufacturers on the collision center programs. And what they're looking for their certified collision programs. It's there's most of the manufacturers are not quite as we are. I would consider us a little big company. We're not massively huge like a lot of the manufacturers are, but we're still a big company. And it's getting our people in connection with the right people in the manufacturers, because it takes a lot of people to be involved in implementing a piece of equipment like Ultimate ADAS. It takes their after sales reps to be able to work with dealership service managers and dealership parts people, and then obviously the legal side of it, and how do you force things on a franchise agreement and that sort of thing, and as well as the engineers to go through that, and then how are we going to implement it through our tool programs. And there's just a lot of pieces that it's more than just a one person kind of thing that this person this one person deals with this one person and it's done.
One thing from I know from being on the dealership side, I've never seen any of the manufacturers, and I'm not banging on the manufacturers at all, but I've never seen them be shy about telling us what pieces of equipment we're going to buy. It was never a, would you like to? It's always, you will be.
Or hey, it's here.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to put you halfways on the spot. I'm just curious. When I say halfways, I'll ask you the first question, and I won't ask you the second question. I'll bring it up, but I won't ask you the question. But who do you find to be the easiest manufacturer to work with?
They all have their strengths and weaknesses with that. It's we have a very, very tight relationship with ones like Nissan. We are, very, very tight partnership, tight talks back and forth and that sort of thing. And as the ADAS side of things has grown, I think we've gotten tighter and tighter relationships with a large number of them. But I can't say that there's any one that is more difficult than another. They just have, or easier than another. They all have their unique processes to go through to be able to ensure that everything is exactly what they want. And in some cases, if it's an imported brand, it might be that somebody here in North America says, yeah, I'm in agreements with it, but they still have to have somebody in Japan or Korea or Germany that gives it its blessing as well. So fortunately for us, we're shipping our product worldwide. We have offices in a lot of different places, so we can help participate in those kind of things. And okay, the North American team is in agreements with it. They're happy with it. Let's go and work with the German team or the Japanese team and help them see how valuable this can be to the dealership. Your point about dealerships, I spent my early career in dealership worlds, and I know the pushback that my dealer gave to things that were mandated. It could be the absolute best thing for the business, but when it comes to it's no different than our kids when we tell them you're not doing that, and it's really not because we don't care, it's because we don't want to see them get hurt.
Yeah.
But they end up trying to do it anyway. The same kind of thing happens, and that's one of the challenges sometimes when there is a mandate, is that it makes it tough for the the initial wall goes up and says, no, we're not going to get this, even though it is the best thing for their technicians, for their customers, for their own liability. Sometimes it becomes a challenge if it's a mandate.
Yeah.
Nobody likes change.
Right. And nobody likes change, and nobody likes getting pushed to have to do something.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I always felt like, I would feel better if they would do a better job of selling me on why I want to buy this rather than telling me I want to buy it. And when somebody tells you something, there's no choice. when somebody gives you options, now I feel like I'm in charge and not you. But it's my dime, not your dime, type thing. So some pretty simple things. But Spike, how do you see if every shop out there goes and gets the ultimate ADAS machine? Are you going to be going back to painting cars? What are you going to do?
No, so and Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. When an OEM says, "Hey, this machine it works, it's good," we give it our blessing, right? You still are supposed to use OEM tools at the end to run the system, to run the calibration. So this is a great verification system to say, "Hey, you're in the perfect spot." Now, if something happens, as long as you can prove you use this and you use the OEM tool, you're good. And that's still services we provide.
And that's that spot on correct. So we have, if somebody said, hey, we want to find another way to be able to do these different makes and models, we can help them with that. But it is, especially when it comes to the OEM side, it's telling you to go get the OEM scan tool. If it's the OEM laptop, that sort of thing to connect, we're dealing with the OEM kind of equipment with that. And it's, in the collision side of the space, what is it? 30, 50, maybe 60% of the time, you set that target in the right place, you hook up the scan tool, and everything goes swimmingly. The other 40% of the time, you're figuring out that the windshield wasn't installed correctly, that the camera wasn't pressed all the way back into its bracket the way it's supposed to, the radar was mounted upside down, somebody replaced the unit but never reprogrammed it. There's 1,000 different things. Never plugged in the harness.
They forgot to tighten the zip tie.
Right. Yep. There's 1,000 different variables, so that there's always going to need to be a technician. And this is a target placement tool. What it does is it takes that variable out. I don't have to think, ooh, did I read that tape measure correctly? Are my measurements right? That sort of thing. I know that where my target is placed, I'm right. If that car is failing, now I'm going back and digging into the car to figure out what's wrong. What it does is really make Spike's job much easier doing the calibration side, because it just eliminated a variable. And it focuses him back in. All right, I got an OEM scan tool, so we know it's not my scan tool, and we know my target's in the exact right place. So therefore, my radar's pointed in the wrong direction because the bracket's bent and nobody caught it, or it never plugged it in, or whatever the other, they painted metallic paint on the bumper cover instead of the pearlescent that they were supposed to put in it, so that it didn't affect the radar, whatever it happens to be. There's 1,000 variables that can really make a mess of an ADAS calibration.
And Jerry, there's also still going to be shops where no machine's going to work because you got a drain that's running maybe the only spot that you have to do it. You got a metal drain running down the floor. Steve, am I correct? This machine still can't solve the metal in the ground portion. It can fix the height issues, but if you have a metal drain, it should still not be done in that area.
It adds a significant level of complexity to make it much more difficult to use, especially when it's a drain in the middle and we're tapered to either side, where it's tapering up, because we don't really know where we're at in that angle. So that becomes a little bit more of a challenge, but it is, it's going to adapt for little variations, but when we have some of those kind of anomalies, it's a bit more of a challenge.
Well, and I would assume the metal from the drain would cause an issue, much like it does if you got metal in your area of workspace, or am I wrong there?
Ken, I have not seen it where that's impacted with it, unless it's been like right kind of in the path of that, like a rear radar, and your drain is running through the middle of the radar kind of thing.
Okay.
Usually we can mitigate some of those things where we can maybe use the space parked on top of it, where the radar is not going to hit it. And that's one of the things that we work with a lot of the shops with. Where do you stand when you're going to be doing this so that you're not in the way of it? Where a drain's going to be, those kind of things. Where's the control unit for your lift going to be, so that when you're doing those calibrations, it's not in your way.
Okay.
Back to somebody building a new shop. A lot of times, especially if you're talking about a dealership, manufacturer comes out and says, "Here's your plans, by the way." And a lot of this stuff isn't thought about. From the architecture side, simply because they haven't even dealt with it. And I even noticed that from some of our manufacturers. They didn't even realize some of the things that they needed in the shops, because most of the concentration is in the front end. They just think, well, you just need a shop, you need a parts department, and a place to put the oil, and away we go. So yeah, planning a shop, this piece is extremely important. It's not just an alignment machine anymore; it's the ADAS system that's extremely important as well.
Well, I got a good question. Steve, so will this machine tell you if the frame is bent? So I had a really good conversation the other day about SET uses CAD data, which is more accurate than some of the other companies that go to a dealership or get a rental car and they throw it up and they measure, and then that's what they post. So those cars could be out of spec from the factory, whereas a car measured on a slet would never be because it's using CAD data. Would this car be able to tell you that? Because in my head, if it's wrong, now you're starting to stack tolerances, bad tolerances. And on our side, we wouldn't really know that without having a select readout or something of that nature.
So this is not really going to measure the unibody or the frame like a Select will measure it, where you're going to hang your targets on it. But as I said, this is a full Hawkeye Elite aligner, so I can turn this on to be what we call a collision aligner. And in 4.5, 5 minutes, if the shop brings in the car, let's say during the estimating process, I have one shop that does repair planning. It comes in, it goes to the wash bay first, then it goes onto the alignment rack. They do that assessment and determine, do I have a bent control arm? Do I have a bent strut? Do I have a bent tie rod end? Now recently, probably within the last year, I had a shop that bought an Ultimate ADAS to do their calibrations and decided we're going to really maximize it and we're going to use it for pre-alignment assessments as well. So they started doing that, and they were 2 weeks into it, and they got some funny readings. And they called me and said, hey, can you look at this and let me know what you think with this? And looking at the numbers, I said, man, I really think that this has got a strut tower that's bent because of the way the numbers were. So they said, you know what? We're going to actually do a full measurement on it. And it was a light hit in the front corner, didn't look like much. But when they did the measure, they found out that the entire front horn was moved over about 3/4 of an inch. They came to me afterwards and said, you know, you saved us about $6,000 because we would have fixed that car. We would have done all the paint work. We'd have thrown it on the alignment rack at the end and gone, oh, we can't actually align it.
Yeah.
And then we'd have been stuck with, the insurance company saying, well, we're not going to pay you to fix it. We're going to total it out and, give you a little bit of money to total it out, and that's it. So it is going to find those kind of anomalies, but this is really working under the assumption that you've gotten your frame straight, and we're just verifying that the wheels are in the right place to OEM specs where that is. Now, we can do a body assessment to see, are those wheels correctly under the space of the body where it should be with that whole measurement process, so that we would know that, all right, something's really screwy here and we probably should move forward with it. But because it is that full aligner, we're taking those alignment measurements and everything that we're doing and attaching that all to our documentation to say our wheels are pointed in the right direction, and now our cameras and our radars and whatever else are pointed in the right direction.
Well, if we're honest, that should be happening anyways, right? I mean, I don't know the number, Steve or Jerry. I know you guys are going to know this better than me, but I think I read an article that said something like 70 or 73% of all cars on the road are out of alignment to some degree. So, I mean, that shops aren't doing this a little more. They probably need to, right? Just to make sure they cover their bases and catch things like what you just said.
So I'm not, you don't have to throw the numbers out, but I'm curious, how much more, if I'm a shop owner, am I going to be paying for the Ultimate ADAS machine versus the one that I can upgrade later?
So the upgrade
How
one
much
is,
does it add?
it's about a half of the price of getting it today.
Okay.
If you were to get an Ultimate ADAS today versus that upgradable machine, it's going to be about half the price of the machine, and then it's going to be, of today's machine, it is a little bit of a premium to have that flexibility to upgrade later than if you just invested in Ultimate ADAS
Okay.
down the line.
Yeah, in my mind, you might as well just jump the whole way and go.
I agree with you completely.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
It's just easier for everybody because you're training it now right away, and the fear of having customers say, you know what, I'm going to wait to that down the line. The reality is that they are putting cars out on the street that need to be calibrated that aren't getting calibrated. And that not only puts the driver of that vehicle at risk, but it also puts every other driver at risk because these systems are not just, a bell beep and buzzer that I can turn off and make it go away. This is automatic braking that can just stop that car in the middle of the street. Or if it's, it can make a steering adjustment and put you into somebody else's lane. There's a lot of ramifications that come from us putting an incorrectly calibrated car out on the market.
And these calibrations aren't going away. I mean,
No.
they're here. I mean, it is what it is. We better get used to it and get comfortable with it.
And I hear a lot of customers will say, well, I think they're going to get to be self-calibration. And I highly doubt that's ever going to really be the case. And then I hear a lot of them say, well, I'm just going to worry about the dynamic ones. I think everything is eventually going to go dynamic. And, some of the manufacturers like Toyota give you that option. I can do it static or I can do it dynamic. And dynamic is great. It's certain times of the year, and you want to get out of the shop and let the air blow through your hair and go out and test drive a car for 30 or 40 minutes. But now I've got a car that's not calibrated completely, that I've got a technician out driving. I don't know if he's just driving that straight process, and it's not like you drive down the road straight for 50 feet and it's calibrated. You could be driving it for a half an hour, 45 minutes just to find the right conditions to be able to calibrate it in. And as a shop owner, I want to put something in that I can quantify the amount of time. I can't do that with a dynamic calibration, but I certainly can do that with a static calibration when I know it's going to take 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever it happens to be. And on top of that, I can actually show the documentation that I did it, and here's exactly where my targets were placed.
Well, and the other side of that is, we're in Nebraska. You get out past Lincoln, it snows. I mean, they close that interstate down all the time. So once that happens, now you got a car sitting for days possibly that you can't calibrate. Heavy rain does the same thing. Poorly lined streets do the same thing. So I think every manufacturer needs to give the option either or. But I know we chatted with some engineers not too long ago and kind of explained that point to them, and their line is mainly dynamics, and they said, oh, we see where that would be very helpful if you guys had that. And I said it'd be life-changing, and again, get our mutual customers back on the road a whole lot quicker sometimes.
Right. Imagine calling a customer and saying, hey, I'd love to deliver your car today, this Friday before the holiday weekend, but I can't because it's going to snow today and I won't be able to calibrate it until Tuesday. You're all right with picking it up 5 days later, and Mr. Insurance Company, we're gonna have that extra 5 days, so we're gonna have to put them in rental car for 5 more days because there's snow on the ground and we can't do that. I had a guy in North Dakota one day ask me about it, and I said, yeah, how many days does it not snow up there? And he said, I don't know, like 3 months out of the year. Like, yeah, those are the 3 months you can calibrate. The rest of the time, you might be stuck.
Or even a Chicago, where you just have gridlock traffic. I know one of my guys, it took him 37 minutes to go 4 miles. You can't calibrate in those, so you may have to drive. It might only be 10 miles. It might take you an hour to get there, and then you can get on a road where you can actually calibrate. And again, insurance doesn't see, or the end bill payer doesn't see that, right? Hey, I had to drive an hour to get there. Then I drove it for half an hour. Then I drove an hour and a half back. That's all things that don't make a ton of sense sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, it's Northern Virginia is the same way. We run into that all the time now they got to figure out where that path is going to be. And then again, they're trusting a technician to be out there. And do they stop over at their girlfriend's house? Do they go to McDonald's? And is the telematics still on the car? So the customer's going, why is my car being driven all over God's creation? What's going on here? Now you're getting 3 or 4 phone calls back at the shop going, what's going on? It opens us up for a lot of difficulty.
Yeah, tough conversations sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, good challenges. So are there any vehicles that the Ultimate ADAS machine does not work with yet?
So there are a few that have dynamic or static calibrations that we haven't fully brought on board with it yet. There's a couple of a German brand that doesn't have any coverage for it as of yet. But by and large, we're looking at it as there's a lot of engineering that goes into each manufacturer. So we're looking at where are the units in operation? Where can we have the most impact to the most amount of customers, to the most amount of shops? By and large, the static calibrations that are being done today, it's got coverage for the large majority of it.
Okay. My guess is you're going to have some shops that are going to be asking how much is going to be the trade-in value of my current alignment machine to get the new one. Which also tells me that there's going to be some shops out there looking to buy some used alignment equipment that doesn't want the ADAS equipment. So there's some opportunities both directions there. So I don't know that I have any other questions other than one, and then it might be open for whatever you folks might have or want to comment on. But you spend a lot of time out in the field training, I'm assuming, in different shops. Is that correct?
Yep,
or groups?
Yep.
I know what my experience has been, and I think I know what your answer is going to be, but do you see most shops with one guy that's the talented guy, he runs the alignment machine and the equipment, or do you see shops that it's open for any technician in the shop to use?
Good question.
Yeah, I see a little bit of both, but I would say probably the most efficient is when there is 2, maybe 3 guys, because if it's one guy and he's on vacation or he's out sick or something, he's in the middle of a big job, now all of a sudden everything bottles up.
Yeah.
So the most efficient ones are where there's 2, maybe 3. It is a lot of knowledge that needs to be obtained, and somebody has to, number one, want to learn, be able to learn, and be open to change, which sometimes is a challenge in the automotive industry.
Yeah.
To find somebody that wants all 3 of those things. So it's difficult to just say, hey, everybody in the shop is going to do this, because some of them are going to be like, nothing works right, and are going to struggle with it and be difficult. Everything's going to be difficult for them. So the most efficient I see is to have that 2 or 3 that are really well trained, really well versed. They start to learn those things to look at, like is the little window around the VIN number, is that straight before I get started? Because if that's crooked, that means my windshield's not in right, and my world just got a whole lot more difficult.
Yeah.
And they know those little nuances, no different than it was with alignment. They knew with this kind of suspension how I got to check a lower ball joint. With this type of suspension, how I got to check a lower ball joint. They get to know those nuances to be most effective.
Yeah.
The challenge that I see in the collision space is that in a lot of the cases, they don't have that mechanical person at all. Mm-hmm. And then that mechanical person might be really great with lefty, loosey, righty, tighty, putting on bolts, putting on suspension, even making alignment adjustments. But when we get into ADAS calibration, we're talking about enhanced electrical diagnosis. Are we able to actually ohm out wires? Are we able to see that wiring harness is pinched and it's drawing too many ohms through it that is affecting the way our calibration is reading? Do they have those skills to be able to do that? And I think that is that's much more of a struggle to say, hey, everybody in the shop is going to do this. It's got to be a select group. All right, you see the same in your world, Spike?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's a big rush for everybody to do their own calibrations. I disagree with that very wholeheartedly, because this is a very serious system. Most of these shops are throwing a detail kit at it and teaching them. That's, to me, is not what this should be. It's very specialized. You need somebody with the utmost integrity to make sure that they're not just forcing it through, which thankfully your system does not let that happen. Yeah, it really scares the crap out of me where we're at and what some shops are choosing to do.
It's specialized. And, my experience with just going back to the alignment rack, for example, I've seen shops both ways as you have, but I've 100% of the time when it was open to anybody in the shop, I also had an alignment machine that was never working right, and it was never taken care of. And 100% of the time, if it's 1 or 2 guys, the machine's taken care of. I don't have to go out and ask about it, because the guy that's taking care of it, that's how he's making his money. And he cares about the piece of equipment, and he guards that with his life. I mean, that's just the way it was. And that's what I always saw.
The other nice thing with this kind of business, too, that if you don't have a mechanical technician, or you do have a mechanical technician, but they're not really great on the electrical side, is this is a whole new job market, really, for somebody that maybe didn't think they were ever going to be a mechanic. They didn't want to be taking out engines and transmissions. I stopped being a technician when I remember the 300D Mercedes that I was working on. It dropped that blob of snow and ice and rocks down the back of my neck, and I decided, I'm not working underneath the car anymore.
Yeah.
Those kind of, there's people that don't want to do that. but they might be a gamer or a programmer today that would be perfectly suited to do this work, because we can train them to make the adjustments they need to make on an alignment and be able to identify bent components through the technology. But they're also the ones that have that skill set to understand, how do I read an oscilloscope and be able to see what's going on with this wiring to determine this is what I've got to replace. And maybe they need a traditional mechanic to take things apart to get them to where they need to be, or to put it back together. But they might be the most detail-oriented people to do that.
Is this ultimate ADAS machine going into tech schools? Is that one of the pieces of equipment that's being purchased?
We have a number of them. So I've worked with Lincoln Tech across the country. They train, we have them train a little bit more with kind of our next level, our lower down machine, really because we want them to train technicians about what they're doing. Where Ultimate ADAS takes out all of that really kind of thought, it's just following the lasers.
Yeah.
So we do it a little bit manual for their training, but then in many of their centers, we have an Ultimate ADAS in there. Many of the, like here in the Maryland, D.C. area, many of the community colleges and even the high school VOTECs have invested in having that equipment, because they know that this is the future of where the industry is going.
Yeah. Good.
Hey, Steve, real quick, can you run through the OEM approvals you do have?
So we have Toyota, Lexus, Nissan Infiniti, Honda Acura, Mazda, and Kia. I feel like I got all of them. Yeah, that's the ones we have right now. We have coverage for more. Those are the ones that have already approved. The other ones are in different states of that. If that's in initial conversations or engineering approvals, or then going through the kind of the final, more, let's see how it all plays out on a daily basis kind of thing.
Okay.
So it is definitely not you have something, yes, we agree, that's good, you're all done. The OEMs are very particular in making sure that it meets all of their standards. So it is an in-depth process, that requires us to go through that each one, and each one is different. How they do that, if it's engineer driven, if it's after sales driven, but typically all of them are going to be a part of that process at some point or another.
And Jerry, when we were beta testing this, I mean, it truly was within a millimeter or two of exactly where we would drop our spot, which is well within what the OEMs give us for tolerances. And we did not have high hopes, Steve, and I'm not bashing, but we had tested a couple to that point. We're like, oh my God, here's another one, And my guys, I mean, we had to force them to do it. And after a week, I was traveling for a week, and I come back and they said, yeah, no, this thing's pretty accurate. They're like, not like the others. So again, kudos to you guys for not being the first out, but making sure that it was right when it came out.
Well, that was 6 years in the making of making sure not only is it going to do the job, is it going to do it accurately, and is it going to do it repeatedly?
Yep.
And I do it time and time again. And I was at SEMA last year, 2 years ago, and the head of engineering at one point said, "Let me show you something." And he grabbed the unit. I had laid out all of the Toyota mats around. I think we had a Toyota Tundra there. I had laid them all out on the floor, and he grabs the whole unit and he swings it off to the side 4 or 5 feet, and then swings it back. I'm like, "Tim, what are you doing to me here?"
Right.
And it sees those cameras again, and then boom, those lasers went down exactly where they were before. It was pretty impressive. So after that, anytime I'm showing somebody this system, I show them that, look, I can even just move it, put it back, and it's going to go right back to where it is supposed to be. It's pretty impressive how accurate and repeatable it is.
It's pretty cool.
Nice. Well, Hunter's always been quality. At least that's been my experience, and so are you, Steve, and so are you, Spike. It's been interesting to play on this topic a little bit on the differences and the pieces of equipment. I'm curious, Steve. What do you do for a hobby? What you do for fun?
Geez, these days it's I do a little bit of small farming around the house. Got a bunch of chickens and things running around, and doing a lot with our dogs. We have 4 dogs, so that's between the 2 of them, it takes up a lot of extra time. But I do have a couple classic cars that I try and get in there a little bit. I have a 30 Studebaker that was a family heirloom. That is a suggestion for you: if you ever have a family heirloom the size of a 30 Studebaker, think about finding something smaller for your family heirloom.
Nice or something.
Yeah, but it's neat having a car. In a couple years it'll be 100 years old.
Wow.
And it's my father, my grandfather, all worked on it. There's been four of us that have driven it in since we've owned it since 1973.
That's pretty cool.
Nice.
Pretty neat.
A few
Pretty
more
neat.
years, I'll be hitting the 100 mark. Spike, what about you?
That all it changes. This year we bought an RV. My wife is a farm girl and she loves camping. I don't like camping. I'm not going to sleep in a tent. I'm way too fat to get up off the ground and feel good about it. So we bought an RV this year and I did not know that I would enjoy it, but I can go out camping with my wife and the grandkids usually come out, and I don't open my computer. I don't work, which for me is a very good win because I struggle with that. But I would say camping is probably my new hobby that has worked out pretty well.
Good, good. I'm curious, how many chickens do your dogs eat?
Right now we got 10.
And
So-
the dogs don't eat any of them?
Now they're actually in their own yard and in their own pen. My dogs could care less. My son has a German short-haired pointer. He is very interested in those chickens, and he
Yeah.
will spend his day watching them run around their yard. But we have a few too many foxes and a few too many hawks in the area to
Yeah.
have them free ranging. So I have them in
Okay.
their semi free ranging. They have a yard that they're protected in, so nothing can get to them. But they can run around and have a good time. Craziest thing is I put a swing in it. I've had chickens for probably 10 or 12 years now, and I once had heard somebody put a swing in their coop. And I thought that's the craziest thing. And our girls will get very upset when they jumped off the swing and it gets tangled and they can't get it. They will make sure that I know it before I leave the house to go untangle their swing for them. And they will sit two or three of them up on the swing and swing all day long.
Wow.
So, Jerry, you asked how many chickens the dog ate. I'll give you a funny story. So my in-laws were farmers, and they moved back out to a very small farm, and they wanted chickens. So me and my friend built a chicken coop for them. We put a fence around it, and we went on vacation, so they watched our dogs. Our dogs killed 50 chickens.
Oh boy.
And I thought my mother-in-law was joking when she said, "You'll never guess what happened." And I'm like, "What?" She goes, "All of our chickens are dead." I said, "What happened?" She said, "Your dogs." That was about a 110-pound black lab, and it took the fence and stretched the fence with its teeth, chain link fence, and him and the other dog went through the hole, and they didn't eat any. They just grabbed them, shook them till feathers flew, and then went to the next one. But it looked like a huge pillow fight.
Well,
That's what they're
Yeah.
bred to do, right from go.
But we had to buy more chickens, obviously.
I'm going to say, yes, I would think so. I can't say that I have any particular hobbies, but you mentioned camping. So my two grandsons and my son and I are going camping this Friday. We're heading out. We're going to be up in the Appalachians. So we like to go when it's a little colder, actually. And so we'll be up there for 4 or 5 days, whatever it ends up being. So, but other than that, I'm being retired. And the only thing I can say is when you get retired, the sad surprise to me is that time goes faster than it ever has. And that's what I don't like about retirement. So I don't know, I might have to go back to work so time slows down. That's the sad part. So anyway. Well, again, thanks both of you. Thank both of you for taking the time, and this has been interesting. I'm going to have to go to a shop around here and take a peek and see some of the equipment running around, and see if I can find an ultimate ADAS machine that I can get a chance to put my hands on it and see what it looks like. But again, thanks both of you for spending the time, and very interesting. So, any comments or anything?
Thanks
No.
for having me.
I just want to say thanks to Steve. We met at SEMA for the first time, and we had great conversation. And it's like, I want to see if we can get him on a podcast with us. So, no, I really appreciate you coming on, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. I really appreciate getting the opportunity.
All right.